Hey guys, my name is Jeff, and today I want to talk to you about the things that made Jesus mad. Now, this idea came from a book that I read about a year ago by HARLOW, and I'll link to that in the description below. But I think this is a really interesting topic to think about and to talk about because we often have the wrong picture of who Jesus was. You see, many of us picture Jesus as this passive, mild-mannered guy who was like always holding a sheep for some reason. And now that picture's wrong on so many levels. But maybe the thing about that picture that's the most wrong is that Jesus was a never raise his voice kind of guy. You see, the Jesus that we see in the Gospels got mad on many occasions. And so I want to look at the 6 things that made Jesus mad. Before we get into that, would you just take a few seconds to like this video and then also subscribe to this channel so that you can stay up to date on videos that are coming out? Number 1, the human condition. Humanity exists in a broken state, a fallen world. And that shouldn't come as surprise to any of us because the evidence is all over the place. I mean, there's kids starving, war is commonplace, people are dying, there's mental health crises abounding, there's broken families all over the place. You see, pain and turmoil is just around the corner. It's everywhere you look. We exist in a fallen, in a broken state. And Jesus was angry about it. I think we see this emotion most clearly come up in John chapter 11, and it's a passage in which Jesus' close friend has died, Lazarus, and Jesus shows up and he's surrounded by Lazarus' family who's mourning. And in that moment, Jesus is overcome with emotion, and the Bible says that he wept. You see, in this moment, Jesus is reacting to the fallen condition of his people. He's overcome by the human condition, so much so that he weeps. Why? Because he feels empathy for his people. Now, Jesus might have felt empathy in that moment, but he responds with anger. See, in John chapter 11, verse 38, Jesus calls out, but a better translation would be yells or screams for Lazarus to come out of the grave. You see, Jesus was mad over the human condition that people he cares about were living in. Number 2, rules being placed over the needs of people. The religious leaders in Jesus' day often cared more about following the letter of the law rather than following the heart of the law. You see, God gave the Israelites this law to follow that was supposed to bring people closer to them. But what the religious leaders in Jesus' day had done is they had made the law alienate people because they valued adherence to the law above everything else. And let's be honest, we're no better today, are we? We still make laws up that keep people away from God. And what Jesus did when he was walking on this earth was he continually broke the laws that the religious leaders had established that kept people away from him. Now, let me be clear. Jesus didn't break the law that God had established. He broke the extra laws that the religious leaders had put in place to keep people from breaking God's law. In other words, the religious leaders added to what God had said. And Jesus came along and continually broke those rules because people are more important than rules. And Jesus got mad when rules were placed over people. We most clearly see this played out in Jesus breaking the rules on the Sabbath, which was a day of rest, and Jesus continually got in trouble with the religious leaders because he chose to heal people on the Sabbath, which was a no-no according to the religious leaders. But Jesus was showing that people's needs, helping and caring and loving for the people that are around you, is more important than adherence to the rules, because the heart of the law is supposed to bring us to a place where we love God and we love people. But the religious leaders had replaced loving people with adhering to the rules, and they had placed rules over people, and that made Jesus mad. Number 3, kids being pushed aside. Jesus seemed to have a special place in his heart for the kids that he interacted with. And this came at a time in society when kids weren't valued. They just were kind of pushed aside. They were kind of nobodies until they grew older. But Jesus had a special place in his heart, and he often got mad when people tried to push the kids aside, when people tried to keep kids away from him. There's this one instance in Mark chapter 10 where Jesus is kind of hanging out with these kids, and the disciples pull him aside and start rebuking him, saying, you shouldn't be spending so much time with these kids. And that's a big mistake when you rebuke Jesus. It doesn't normally go in your favor. And Jesus kind of went off on them a little bit and said, listen, you need to become like one of these kids to enter into the kingdom of heaven. You see, Jesus had a special place in his heart for kids. And it made him mad when people pushed them aside. The fourth thing that made Jesus mad was self-righteous judgmentalism. You see, we love to pretend like we are better than we actually are, like we have it all together, like we're better than the rest of them. We like to pretend like we don't struggle with what they struggle with, and that's really just being self-righteous. It's being judgmental, and Jesus can see right through that. We see this played out in the Gospels over and over again in Jesus' interactions with the religious leaders. You see, they pretended to be good. They looked good on the outside, but Jesus kept pointing out that on the inside, they weren't as clean, they weren't as good, they weren't as holy as they portrayed themselves to be. And throughout the gospel, we see Jesus getting angry with them because they are pretending to be something they are not. See, Jesus got angry over self-righteous judgmentalism. Jesus famously calls out this hypocrisy in Matthew chapter 23, where he looks at the Pharisees and he says, listen, you pay so much attention to wash the outside of the cup, but you neglect what's inside. And what's inside is far, far more important than what's outside. And what Jesus was saying was, he was saying, you care so much about what other people think of you, what other people see of you, but you've ignored the heart. And what I see is what's on the inside. That's what's really important. That's what actually matters. And I think it's important to note here that Jesus wasn't really mad at their sin. He was mad at their refusal to admit that they needed a doctor. He was mad that they refused to admit that they were sick. He wasn't mad that they were sick. He was mad that they wouldn't admit that they were sick. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because if we go to Jesus with our sin, he will offer us grace and a forgiveness. But when we hide it and pretend that we're better than we're not, that's when Jesus gets angry. So, what makes Jesus mad? The religious leaders, the religious phonies that pretended to have it all together while ignoring the sin in their own heart. The fifth thing that made Jesus mad was making it difficult for people to come to God. Now, this one and the last one kind of go hand in hand. Jesus often butted heads with the religious leaders of the day over these two issues, but the religious leaders had kind of this habit of making things more complicated and more difficult for people to come to God. They would add rules that God didn't say and burden people with more things they had to do. They would sell sacrifices for a profit. They would belittle people that weren't as good as they were. They had this habit of making it difficult for people to come to God. And that made Jesus mad, and that's what ultimately led to the episode where Jesus walked into the temple and started flipping tables and chasing people out with a whip, because they were making it difficult for people to get to God. They were taking the sacrifices required under the Old Testament law and then charging exuberant amounts for those people. And they had all sorts of ways of scamming people and making it more difficult to do what God was requiring of them. You see, the religious leaders in Jesus' day were making it difficult for people to get to God, and that made Jesus angry. See, Jesus' heart, his desire is for all to come to know him, for all to enter into a relationship with him. And when we add rules or make it more difficult for people to come to Jesus, that makes him mad. And the last thing that made Jesus mad was selfish ambitions. Jesus often got mad when people came to him with ulterior motives or selfish ambitions, because what Jesus is really after is the heart. And he critiqued those who prayed loudly to put on a show for others, but were doing it for the wrong reasons. He critiqued those who dropped large sums of money in the offering plate and said no, he would rather have the widow who dropped a single penny. You see, Jesus is really after a relationship. He's not looking for a people that will just blindly follow him and submit to what he tells us to do. He wants people that want to do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. He wants a relationship with us. And that's why he gets angry when he sees people that are doing the right thing, but they're not doing it with the right heart. They're doing it for their own selfish ambition, what they can get out of it, that people might look better for them, that maybe they can get something from God, or that people will think more highly of them than they really are. You see, when we do things with selfish ambition, we're missing the point. God doesn't want us to just blindly follow the rules. He wants us to enter into a relationship with him. And that's why Jesus got mad at those with selfish ambition. So those are the 6 things that made Jesus mad. And may this list be a challenge for you to evaluate your life and see if what you get mad at is the same things that Jesus got mad at. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you learned something and that it helped you rethink some of the areas of your life and your faith. Would you subscribe before you leave this channel? Also like this video and then leave a comment below and just tell me what you would add to this list. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.